Chicago Theological Seminary, and I am delighted to welcome us all to the Fall Convocation 2021. And before we get started, I just wanted to go over a few Zoom best practices, housekeeping, since we gather in large numbers for these Wednesday gatherings. As you're coming into the meeting, you're automatically on mute. Please keep yourself on mute unless you have reason to be speaking so that we don't have a lot of background noise. Also note that in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you can choose speaker view or gallery view. Speaker view gives you the person speaking in large format, and gallery view lets you see all the faces of those who are gathered with you. So feel free to toggle between those two as you wish. As with all of our Wednesday gatherings, this gathering is being recorded. Our recordings are available, usually to give us a day or two to get them up, but they're available on the CTS YouTube page, and there's a link to that on the homepage from the CTS website. So if you want to share this with others afterwards or come back and watch again, you definitely can do that, and just note that we are recording. So peace and blessings to all of you, and wishing an easy fast to those who will be observing Yom Kippur starting this evening. And with that, I will turn to Brian Clark, our board chair. Welcome, Brian.
Welcome all. Good afternoon. I am Brian Clark, the current board chair for CTS. And on behalf of the entire board, I'd like to welcome all of you to the Fall Convocation for the academic year. While we're certainly not back to normal yet, I pray that all have returned to some semblance of normalcy in our lives. And I know we're all looking forward to being face-to-face again as quickly as possible. Well, today it is my privilege to introduce the Reverend Dr. Marcia Foster Boyd, our newly appointed interim president. Literally a godsend. Marcia comes to us with a great depth of experience as president of the former president of the Ecumenical Theological Seminary in Detroit, Michigan, an associate pastor, professor of pastoral care and counseling at the United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio, and even serving as an accreditation and director of accreditation and leadership education at ATS, which is one of the two of our primary accrediting bodies. Now, while I could go on, I think it's more important that you have an opportunity to hear directly from Marcia. And with this, I'd like to present the Reverend Dr. Marcia Foster Boyd to you all. Thank you very much, and enjoy her comments and the convocation.
Thank you so much, Brian, and to all of you. It is my honor and my privilege to serve this year as your interim president. I've told many people that there were only two schools in the ATS that I ever wanted to be president of. The first was Ecumenical Seminary, and the second was CTS, never imagining that it would be at this time in my life and this time in the life of the institution. I'm looking forward this year to working with each of you as we recalibrate, I would say, as we look behind, but more so, we recalibrate, see where we are, and position ourselves to be ready for what's coming. We know that the institution has welcomed new staff and has said adieu to others. And we look forward to getting our teams reassigned and just working together effectively. I am privileged and honored to have the opportunity to walk with CTS in this interim period. And I would at this time declare the opening of the 2021-22 academic year. Welcome.
I did. Here's our processional. So that's our very formal processional this year. I'd like to begin the academic announcements with a land acknowledgement. As we gather together from all the places we call home, including that building you saw us enter, which many of us miss and some of us are still waiting to visit, I invite you to reflect on what it means to belong to a place, and then to remember those who called it home before us. If you know the Native American nations who lived where you now live, please paste it into the chat. I'll speak from my place, grateful, humbled, chastened. I acknowledge that the place where I sit, Chicago, is named by the Algonquin peoples for the Chickaqua, the onions, leeks, and ramps that grew along the river. It was for generations the homelands of the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi nations. So again, if you know the place where you sit, if you know the tribes who called it home, go ahead and paste that into the chat as we continue our academic notices. We gather at Convocation to formally mark that part of our common life, which is devoted to learning, teaching, writing, and research. I suppose the first academic notice you might notice is that I am giving them. I am serving as interim academic dean and vice president for academic affairs through January, while Dr. Crowder's on sabbatical. And I'm sure you noticed that Dr. Marcia Foster Boyd has begun her service as interim president, for which we are extremely grateful and fortunate. So what else can I tell you? Faculty and staff are continuing to work out the details of our tri-term schedule, which will begin next year. It's designed so that students can complete their degree programs more efficiently if they want to make progress during the summers. And this fall, we have 304 students from almost every state in the United States and beyond, identifying with over 40 spiritual life stances, registered for over 30 courses. We have a total of over 600 registrations. There's a lot of learning going on here, and it's wonderful. But there is more teaching and learning than is visible in the classroom, and I want to share just a few highlights of the work of our amazing faculty. Dr. Ringer is co-editing a book with one of our PhD graduates, Teresa Smallwood. It's called Moved by the Spirit, Religion and the Movement for Black Lives. And Dr. Morales has contributed a vital chapter to that book called On Invisibilities. We're also delighted to announce that Dr. Ringer was promoted last spring to associate professor with tenure. Congratulations. Dr. Moon has a new book entitled Goat Walking, a Quaker Pastoral Theology, and we will have a celebratory program in 2 weeks during this Wednesday gatherings time, in which Dr. Moon and our PhD student, Lena Safi, will discuss the book. I'm hoping that goats will be present, but no one has been able to make promises to me about that. Dr. So has been publishing his insights on theology and photography in the Korean journal, Christian Thought, many of them drawn from his experience teaching the classes here. Dr. Stone's article, Food, Sex, and the Garden of Eden, or What's the Bible About?, was published in the Bible, Gender, and Sexuality Critical Readings collection of essays. And he also presented at Oxford University in relation to his contributions on the books of Samuel and Kings in their forthcoming handbook on Hebrew Bible, Gender, and Sexuality. Dr. Wong presented a paper called Queering Religious Education, Interweaving LGBTQ+ Life and Religious Yearning to LGBTQ+ Advocacy, Education, and Ministry at the Religious Education Association Annual Conference. Like Dr. Crowder, Dr. Joanne Terrell is on sabbatical this semester, but I want to mention that she was recently ordained Lama Bodhi Satyagraha at the Bodhi Krishna Sangha of the Thomasville Buddhist Center. So she brings her rich spiritualities to our community. And we're grateful that Dr. Scott Haldeman, Associate Professor of Worship, who has returned from his sabbatical last spring, has agreed to share a convocation address with us this afternoon. Dr. Haldeman teaches a variety of excellent courses at CTS with his areas of deepest expertise around ritual studies, liturgy, worship, and LGBTQ+ studies. He's also our convocation guru, helping to shape and facilitate many of our official occasions. If you don't have the opportunity to study with him, you can turn to his writings to enjoy his beautiful prose and insightful analysis, including a major article on Christian sacraments and queer theory, recently accepted for publication in the T&T Clark's Companion to Sacraments and Sacramentality. Isn't published yet, you're gonna have to wait, but it'll be out. Dr. Haldeman's title today is Notes on Faith and Failure. In the spirit of Anton Boysen, it's a courageous examination of spiritual and psychological struggle, one that can be liberative for all of us as we grapple with our own expectations and limitations. First, we will open our hearts with prayer, song, and scripture.
CTS community, will you join me and listen to the prayer written by Dr. Crowder for a back-to-school blog entitled Church Anew? Holy One, who created us and made us, we are grateful for the privilege of education, yet we are anxious, nervous, irritated, and fretful. We were scared then. We are still scared now. You can handle all of this honesty. Blow winds of protection over students, teachers, professors, assistants, and administrators who are trying to find definition in uncertainty. Blow winds of care-filled instructions and discernment throughout every classroom, counselor's office, corridor, and cafeteria. Breathe winds of covering over bus drivers, crossing guards, cafeteria workers, guidance counselors, coaches, and nurses charged with caring for our loved ones as they seek to care for themselves. Blow winds of safety as instructions is offered through mask, plexiglass, and cloth constructions. Let there be mercy in the mask, peace in the plexiglass, and protective equipment. Blow winds of peace and provision in homes and shelter that will continue to serve as classrooms, cafeterias, pods, and before and after school programs. Breathe winds of abundance of sanitizer, Lysol, bleach-laden wipes, and all personal protective gear. Be the master teacher and guide mom, mama, mommy, dad, daddy, poppy, big mama, papa, sister mama, uncle mama, mama, auntie, nana, guardians, and all who remained as teachers, tutor, IT tech, principal, guidance counselor, coach, librarian, and research persons in their home. Bind Wi-Fi, cable, and internet access capability. Boost finances and internet access capability. Boost finances and fiscal boom. Be near us as we must be physically distant from one another. Let your omnipresence bind us to one another. Be the immunologists, epidemiologists, virologists that the immunologists, epidemiologists, and virologists need. Be the healing source to the vaccines. Be our love for the vaccinated and unvaccinated. bring to our remembrance loved ones that lost loved ones during this corona pandemic. Be thou our vision, our voice, our victory, as we transverse through the vicissitudes of a semi-virtual learning and working COVID environment. As we return to in-person communion, teach us to personify your grace and your goodness. Amen.
Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart feel lonely and long for heaven and home? When Jesus is my portion, a constant friend is he. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches over me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. He watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches. I know he watches. I know he watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. He watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. He watches me. He watches me. I know
Oh. So what the hell happened?
A reading from Psalm
Oh.
88. This is the New Revised Standard Version, slightly modified. O Lord, God of my salvation, when at night I cry out in your presence, let my prayer come before you. Incline your ear to my cry. For my soul is full of troubles, and my life draws near to Sheol. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I am like those who have no help, like those forsaken among the dead, like the slain that lie in the grave, like those whom you remember no more, for they are cut off from your hand. You have put me in the depths of the pit, in the regions dark and deep. Your wrath lies heavy upon me, and you overwhelm me with all your waves. You have caused my companions to shun me. You have made me a thing of horror to them. I am shut in so that I cannot escape. My eyes grow dim through sorrow. Every day I call on you, O Lord. I spread out my hands to you. Do you work wonders for the dead? Do the shades rise up to praise you? Is your steadfast love declared in the grave, or your faithfulness in the place of destruction? Are your wonders known in the darkness, or your saving help in the land of forgetfulness? But I, O Lord, cry out to you. In the morning, my prayer comes before you. O Lord, why do you cast me off? Why do you hide your face from me? Wretched and close to death, from my youth up, I suffer your terrors. I am desperate. Your wrath has swept over me. Your dread assaults destroy me. They surround me like a flood all day long. From all sides, they close in on me. You have caused friend and neighbor to shun me. My companions are in darkness.
Good afternoon. I hope my words are worthy of the wonderful introduction. Thank you, Dean Mikva. And I speak today as a Christian theologian, a Presbyterian among the UCC, happily. To Acting President Foster Boyd, to Interim Academic Dean Mikva, Chair Clark, my wonderful colleagues on the faculty. My phone is making noise. There we go. To my wonderful colleagues on the faculty, board members, students, especially those of you who are joining us for the first time this fall term 2021, friends of CTS, grace and peace. And thank you for the honor of your attention as I share in this convocation address some notes on faith and failure. At CTS, it is our mission statement and statement of commitments to which we look as we strive and learn, as we struggle and reconcile, when we want to know who we are and who we want to be. And of course, we fail in relation to these as well. One of these reads, we are committed in a world suffering from spiritual impoverishment, which is characterized by meaninglessness, lovelessness, and hopelessness, to proclaim a message of divine purpose, compassion, and promise. But what happens when a sense of meaninglessness, lovelessness, hopelessness is not out there, but in here? What do I do when you are so suffering? What do I do, or what do you do when it is me? To be specific, and the next sentence was hard to write, but it's a bit easier to say now with the distanciation of ink on page. I failed in my sabbatical project. I failed myself. I failed CTS, who gifted me with time away. I failed all of you who now so warmly welcome me back. Some of you were able to thrive during the pandemic. I know this and I honor this. You were stuck at home, but managed to work productively, to write, to study, to raise kids, to teach them, to start new hobbies, to finish exciting new projects, to cultivate bubbles of safety that made for sufficient human contact and relational depth. I also realize, of course, that many had no choice but to go to their job sites, to risk health, even life itself, so as to be of service, whether as medical caregivers, service workers, mail order delivery drivers, retail workers, and so on. Yet granted the multiple and substantial privileges of working at home, of receiving a paycheck, being able to fail, in fact, for others of us, certainly for me, this time was much harder. I found myself living in shadows, perhaps as a shadow. I was both isolated and isolating at home during the pandemic, cutting myself off from connections and support that might have pulled me out of the mire. We all witnessed the fragility of our economic structures and the way inequities of race and class and national origin and so much more compounded the suffering of so many. I was both horrified by the intransigence of white supremacist violence embodied in a militarized culture of law enforcement, and hoping that the outpouring of protest for change might, just might, make for too long awaited increases in justice and mercy across this land and across the globe. Yet killings persist, and prisons are super spreader sites. It was and remains a time saturated in death. Despair became a constant temptation. And this requires a costume change. Just a moment. From academic drag to pandemic drag. And I have bare feet, although you can't see them. There were many days when I just stared at the blank Word document on my computer's desktop, the cursor blinking and fingers ready, but no clicks came, no words formed. There were days when I could get a few good words down, but soon the momentum stopped, my mind twisting and turning, stuck in loops of thought about our basic selfishness, our lack of concern for the common good, our cruelties and ignorance and violent distrust. As Dr. Ringer put it recently, and I'm paraphrasing, what is the point of knowledge production when facts don't matter? On such days, I simply had to go back to bed. There were days too when getting out of bed proved impossible. I do not think this is an irrational response to the state of the world. It may be evidence of some constitutional weakness in me. It may belie my claims to be a person of vital faith, but I don't think so. I absorb the pain around me and internalize it. My coping mechanisms tend to be aimed inward and are all too often self-destructive. My body, mind, soul, being became and remains off kilter. And like the psalmist, my cries for help were met with silence. I didn't feel under divine assault, but I felt abandoned. My companions only the dark. Or to use Pauline language in reverse, I may not have been literally crushed, but I was certainly afflicted, driven to despair, not destroyed, but certainly struck down. And all this got me interested in the phenomenon of failure. And so the following all too brief and sketchy reflections, which have yet to bear real fruit, but in the process have provided at least new provocative questions to occupy my addled brain. First, a helpful conversation partner is cultural critic and queer theorist Judith, also known as Jack Halberstam, and their book, The Queer Art of Failure. The doublet of failure and success are key here. In a world of inequitable and unjust political and economic structures, where success is most concretely measured by the accumulation of wealth, do we want to be successful? Can we see the poor and downtrodden not as failures, but as necessary victims in a game that is based exclusively on winning and losing? In relationship to the academy, Halberstam asks, similarly, when the disciplinary structures mete out rewards to those who conform to the methods and approaches of each specific guild, how do we come to new ways of knowing? In other words, if we refuse disciplinary norms, do we not risk failing to be legible to the guardians of our guilds? For Halberstam, quoting Quentin Crisp, failure happens also to be a queer style. Failing at normative gender performances or parodying them, seen as non-reproductive without some sort of intervention, queer folks have grown used to creating alternative spaces in the dark, on the margins. Halberstam promotes a politically engaged and savvy politics of refusal and negativity, as opposed to, let's say, the nihilism of someone like Lee Edelman. She writes, and I apologize for the partisan call out that is included here, there is something powerful in being wrong, in losing, in failing, since all our failures combined might just be enough, if we practice them well, to bring down the winner. Let's leave success and achievement to the Republicans, to the corporate managers of the world, to winners of reality TV shows, to married couples, to SUV drivers. The concept of practicing failure perhaps prompts us to discover our inner dweeb, to be underachievers, to fall short, to get distracted, to take a detour, to find a limit, to lose our way, to forget, to avoid mastery, and with Walter Benjamin, to recognize that empathy with the victor invariably benefits the rulers. All losers are heirs of those who have lost before them. Failure loves company, end quote. There's much to ponder here, to ruminate upon. Thank you, Dr. Stone. However, while I wish I could claim that my future was a radical political strategy to undermine harmful schemes of success and chart new territory, it was not. A point I will return to in a moment. Another thinker on failure is Emil Cioran, a Romanian existentialist philosopher. I thank Dr. Morales for introducing his work to me, and I am still very much at the introductory phase here. Differently than Halberstam, and perhaps more radically even, Cioran begins with the premise, which he thinks is obvious to anyone who observes life on this planet, that creation itself is a failed project, that whatever we call God failed to create anything more than absurdity and arbitrary suffering. And even more, that the human project is completely devoid of meaning or hope. He thinks it is better to accept this than to deny or avoid or distract ourselves from it. He also thinks that failure is more important to the individual life than success. If one embraces failure, one learns one's limits so that one can fail better the next time one faces a challenge. Success only reinforces our naivete. Now, this is clearly a life stance that refuses religion altogether. Cioran seems a bit sympathetic to Buddhism and other traditions that begin with suffering as first principle, but in the end, he goes his own way. Still, I think it is a position to contemplate so that our notions of providence are not full of empty promises and denials. As I said when concluding my conversation with Halberstam, so with Cioran, I wish I could claim that my own recent failure was a radical philosophical choice to break the taboo of silence and to embrace, even celebrate failure for the sake of self-improvement, more honest social interaction, and existential ease. It was not. And this leads us back to CTS and the relationship of failure and mental health. Our third and final stop on this little detour through a bit of theory is Anton Boysen, through his theological memoir, Out of the Depths. We like to claim Boyson here at CTS, and it is true that a portion of his cremated remains lies in our memorial garden outside the eastern doors. We call him the founder of CPE, although, having read it recently, his memoir indicates that his model for clinical training of theological students actually lost out, and that he considered this one of the major failures in his life. I'll save more details for conversation with CPE folks some other time. In any case, I turned to him because of his experience of severe psychotic breaks, at least 3 of which required extended hospitalization, and the way he came to see these episodes as crucial to his sense of vocation, his teaching ministry, and his theology. Boyson was most interested in distinguishing types of mental illness, especially varieties of schizophrenia, and then analyzing them in relationship to their religious dimensions or analogies. In both Prophecy and Madness, Boyson saw a person seeking reorganization, the former in ways of healing and the latter in malignancy. While burdened in these periods by a flooding of his entire being by what he calls automatisms, a sense of totalizing yet false reality, he nevertheless thought his breaks contributed to his life and work. He would have remained in his first career of forestry rather than answer his call to ministry. He would have remained obsessed with a woman he could not have. He would not have pursued the relation of spirituality and psychology for his own health and for the benefit of many in church and society. I suffer less acute maladies. I face generalized anxiety and depression, which is so common these days. Boyson presses me to search for the spiritual dimensions and theological implications of this suffering. He also models a vocational journey of stops and starts, periods of productivity punctuated by times of acute suffering, forced isolation, and healing. He was a failure as a parish minister, yet a talented researcher and teacher who changed the face of theological education, even if not exactly the way he wished to. When the reader reaches the end of the book and finds a listing of everything he ever published, one wonders if he is justifying his productivity. Perhaps. It seems even the most self-aware of us still is tempted to justify our existence in terms of measures of success that Halberstam and Saron assail. So what might all this mean? I make no claim to great insight, but a few initial thoughts related to faith and failure and theology and theological education come to mind. First, in theological education generally, and at CTS in particular, the faces of those who suffer are constantly before us. For some of us, anger is fuel for activism. For others, we are called to attend in healing ways. But all of us can get overwhelmed. Be gentle with yourself and each other. When someone responds differently than you do to some occasion of injustice or tragedy, wait to hear their story before judging the adequacy of their action or inaction. And when you are unable to meet a presented need, be humble, admit failure, ask for help. Second, when you feel like a failure, embrace it. Then think about the criteria which are operative. What in this situation defines success? Who is benefiting? Is there another way to frame all this? Another way to be? Might this be an opportunity to not follow the rules, to not conform, and so to invent something new? Third, I'm coming to believe that our traditions fail us when they get framed as singularly heroic narratives only. The heroes of the faith are those who walk through the fire, who thwart the enemies, who remain loyal and active even when all seems lost. We would do well to also search out the testimonies of those who simply cried out in anguish, like our psalmist. There is no rescue here. Isn't that faith too? Heather Murray Elkins, a feminist liturgist and preacher, tells a story that I've decided we don't have time for about a fellow seminarian colleague who was dismissed from the program that they both pursued. This woman said to Heather as she was packing her car to leave the school for the final time, "I'll give you a gift. It is a hard gift. It is a question. What does it mean to succeed in a place dedicated to a suffering servant?" Indeed. Fourth, I'm coming to believe also, and this is a two-parter, that A, our traditions fail us when we make mental illness, a spiritual problem only. And here the tendency is to blame the victim, the sufferer, for not having enough faith to trust God to bring them through. But that they also fail us when they deny any connection between our anguish and our spiritual dimensions, leaving it only to the psychotherapist. To hold this tension, to be open to each individual's account of what they suffer and whether the cause is biological or psychic or spiritual or some combination of these, and then to bring the right tools and processes to bear seems key. And fifth and finally, we can only be of help to one another if we stop keeping up appearances. Vulnerability is key. How are you? Fine is the dominant American way. It has been surprisingly liberating and a first step towards healing, I think, to refuse that custom. To how was your sabbatical? I now say a disaster. Folks may be taken back for a moment, but the consequence is a more genuine engagement along with openings for mutual support. So, what does it mean to succeed in giving a talk about failure? I can only say that if I have failed, I embrace it, because these new questions of how we are to live, how we are to do our work, how we are to be community in these odd days will, I am growing confident, lead eventually to some fruit, perhaps to a less naive faith. As Halberstam concludes, turning to a queer Jewish storyteller, Mari Sendak, and I quote here, in Where the Wild Things Are, Max leaves the sad and haunted beasts with whom he has built and destroyed habitats and submits to the strong pull of the Oedipal home. But along the way to these happy endings, bad things happen to good animals, monsters, and children, and failure nestles in every dusty corner, reminding the child viewer that this too is what it means to live in a world created by mean, petty, greedy, and violent adults. To live is to fail, to bungle, to disappoint, and ultimately to die. Rather than searching for ways around death and disappointment, the queer art of failure involves the acceptance of the finite, the embrace of the absurd, the silly, and the hopelessly goofy. Rather than resisting endings and limits, let us instead revel in and cleave to all of our own inevitable, fantastic failures, end quote. Whatever else they may mean, my notes today certainly call for a cold and broken hallelujah. Thank you.
We now move to that part of our gathering where we're calling it community prayer. In the Christian traditions, it's called the prayers of the people. I grew up in the Pentecostal tradition. We just called it a good old altar call. Whatever you may call it, this is now the time in both our blessedness and brokenness to share our heart in our prayers before God, and if you so choose, before each other. I invite you for a brief moment, if you are so inclined, to share your prayer request in the chat. You are a part. And after a few moments of sharing whatever you may want to share in the chat, I will close us in a word of prayer. And I conclude my prayer in honor of our History of Christian Thought class with a prayer adopted from the apostolic constitutions of the 2nd and 3rd century. Let us take now a moment to share our hearts and our prayers through the chat. Let us pray. O Lord God of our joy and salvation, the most compassionate, most merciful, we gather, and indeed you gather us from north and south, east and west. We stand before you in awe and adoration and in tears as the psalmist cries out, let our prayer come before you. Incline your ear to our cry. In this moment, via chat and in our hearts, you have heard and seen our prayers, prayers of joy and pain, prayers of celebration and lament, of hope and despair, creeds both orthodox and heretical, acclamation leaping forth from success, and Jeremiah squeezed out from our failures. We are oriented by your grace, even while we are disoriented by the absurdity of our blessed yet broken existence. We shout out both an amen grounded in certitude, and we whimper a cold and broken hallelujah. Here, in our vulnerability, in our blessed life engendering vulnerability, here we stand. Let our prayer come before you. Incline your ear to our cry. O God, Mother, Father, Creator of us all, give us in this new school year a body unstained, a pure heart, a watchful and incisive mind, upright understanding, and the disruptive presence of your Spirit, that we may obtain and ever hold fast to an unshakable faith in your truth, goodness, and beauty. We pray all this in all the names by which we call you. Amen, amen, and amen.
We're so grateful for all that we have heard this day. We have been blessed by the fractured words of Dr. Haldeman. We have been blessed by music. And I invite you to change your view to the gallery view, because we have been blessed by seeing one another. I invite you, as we would in my congregation, we would maybe give each other signs of peace or hold hands, but let's just raise our hands to one another in a sign of unity, in a sign of grace, in a sign of our vulnerability and our brokenness and our failures and our love. Let us march on this year until victory is achieved. In the name of all that is holy and righteous. Amen and amen.
All right, folks, let's get a little crazy and let's survive together. Take care. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Do